Jody, did you make that happen? Yes. Doug, are you available to address the audience?
Yes, I am, Ray. Thanks. Good afternoon or good evening, everybody. This is Doug Martin with the Natural Resource Damage Program. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and thank Ray and some of the other staff at the Natural Resource Damage Program, specifically Catherine Hausrath and Aspen Ward, for working on this amendment and putting it together. Also would like to thank and acknowledge Anaconda Deer Lodge County, Carl Hamming and others there for their work helping us put this together. It's an important document for us to continue our work in Anaconda. But also need to recognize and thank all of you that are here tonight because this is a public document, and without your public support for implementing these restoration plans, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So thank you for your past participation, and we look forward to working with you in the future. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ray to move on with the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Doug. All right. Welcome, everybody. So watch out on ice. I broke my leg a couple of weeks ago, or 7 weeks ago. A broken femur is not good no matter your age. So note to self, watch out for ice. All right, with that, obligatory to know, I'm Ray Vinkey. I'm an environmental scientist and project manager for the Natural Resource Damage Program. I'm based in Butte. On the line, we just heard Doug Martin, who's our program administrator. Also, Catherine Hausrath, legal counsel, is on the line, and Jody and Aaron are there helping us with administration. What we're going to be talking about tonight is essentially a planning document, which will direct how up to $4 million restoration funding can be spent on county lands and Anaconda. I did want to just mention to everybody right up front that what we're talking about is funding from the Natural Resource Damage Program, but they're county lands. So any management decisions that are made in terms of where motorized travel would be or non-motorized or any of those particulars, that's the county's decision space, and we'll get there together. But again, we're talking about a funding mechanism, and tonight we're interested in just answering some of your questions about the presentation I'm going to deliver and the document itself, and then everybody who's going to make comments, you got to do so written comments, not verbal comments tonight. And those comments can be mailed to the Natural Resource Damage Program or emailed. In the handouts we presented, there's enough for everybody, but we have a QR code on the screen at the end of this, which will show you a link where you can to the proper address to submit comments. So anyway, so with that, I'm going to just pick this up. So, but main thing again, really important, if you have written comments, we welcome them, we want to see them. They've got to be submitted online or in the mail. Tonight, we're just taking questions. It's like there's a little delay here. Okay. So a couple things to note, just since this meeting is both in person, all you, as well as there are some folks online with our staff, as well as some other members of the public. I just want to note for everybody that this meeting is being recorded. So yeah, anything you say will be heard by the public record. We ask everybody to announce your name before speaking, whether you're online or in person. And that if you have questions and you're online, then you raise your virtual public hand, and then when you're called out, we'll address your question. All right, so briefly tonight, I'm going to talk about who the Natural Resource Damage Program is, what we do. I'll provide a certain background on the settlement for damages to the Anaconda Uplands. That's the mechanism which is going to fund sometimes $4 million in county lands. Then I'll lay out the amendment to the restoration plan that we've developed, as well as alternatives and actions that would be pursued underneath it, and provide additional information on how everybody can participate. So the Natural Resource Damage Program is a state program. We have sites all the way from Libby down to Glendive, multiple sites statewide. Our mission is to recover damages for natural resources injured by the release of hazardous substances and oil in order to restore, rehabilitate, place, or acquire the equivalent of those injured resources. So essentially, we work on the behalf of the state of Montana to recover damages to plants and waters that are damaged by pollution and use those to restore those resources. You guys see the screen? Am I standing a bit? Is that better now? Probably. So we do sites statewide. Our focus tonight is, of course, concerning 2008 CD, and what we're talking about is the Anaconda Uplands restoration plan. So as everybody knows in this room, Anaconda was founded due to its, Mark Saley said, smelter up here. Over the course of a century, there are emissions and the deposition of heavy metals that were the result of the operation of those smelters. Those emissions resulted in significant injuries to the uplands around it. Both the Natural Resource Damage Program worked on an initial assessment of injury in and around Anaconda. We documented in our initial sort of injury assessment 18 square miles of damaged lands. Those are places where they weren't functional for wildlife habitat. There's significant erosion, deposition of heavy metals, all resulting in a lack of vegetation. And those lands on the right here, you can see Stucky Ridge, Anaconda, Smelter Hill, and Mount Hagen for the focus of our lawsuit or our claim, I should say. In 2008, we did settle the Atlantic Richfield Company for damages to the Anaconda Uplands. The settlement was for $13.3 million, and those funds were to be used to complete integrated restoration remedy on Stucky Ridge, DNRC lands in Stucky Ridge, as well as Fish, Wildlife, and Parks properties on Mount Hagen. So that $13.3 million was, in this case, state of Montana taking responsibility for remediation as well as restoration. On some sites, we will just do the restoration on many of our sites. Let's see. So whenever we, per CERCLA or Superfund law, whenever we settle on a claim, it's necessary that we have a restoration plan to guide those expenditures. Essentially, the goal being to make sure that the state is clear in its prioritized in its priorities, that the funds are adequately appropriated, and that they're consistent with what the public wants. So in 2008, we did develop a restoration plan for the Anaconda Uplands that was focused on work on Mount Hagen and Stucky Ridge. And one of the clauses in that plan was that should the state complete remedial work on Mount Hagen, wildlife management areas, and DNRC lands in Stucky Ridge, then up to $4 million would be available for use on Anaconda county lands to pursue restoration actions. So in 2020, that's what set the table for where we are here, basically. So in the spring of 2023, the EPA and DEQ certified certification of remedial completion but essentially EPA and DEQ said, okay, you guys have done your jobs, your job in the uplands to keep metals from getting into the creeks, and you can proceed from there to work on. So that was this exercise. This document is adding in a lot of detail that wasn't in the initial plan because we weren't to the point yet. So in order to develop this amendment to the Uplands Restoration Plan, what we did was we came to youth through our publics in spring of 23 to look at folks' ideas, any just kind of get the pulse of the room, see where folks would like us to focus our work. Subsequent to that, we examined that information. We were in discussions with the county and Fish, Wildlife and Parks. And on the basis of those communications, we developed an initial set of alternatives and activities that we implement on county land and for. At the same time, the county was developing their county open lands plan. That document is essentially setting forth a suite of opportunities to pursue recreational projects on county lands. That was being developed concurrently with the amendment. I think the idea by NRD and the county is that these can be complementary documents. Potentially some funds from this Anaconda amendment would be used on county lands as directed by the open lands plan. So they kind of work hand in hand. This fall, myself and the team, the Natural Resource Damage Program, we finished drawing up this amendment to the restoration plan, and in November, put it up to all of your opportunity for all of you to comment on. We're looking for all comment to come by January 15th. That's the deadline. So we've got a little more than a week. And after we analyze public comment, what we'll do is, based on that information and the other incoming information, we'll complete a final restoration or final amendment, which we will advance to the governor. The governor will make a decision in 2025 on how to proceed, either accept the amendment as written or possibly make some changes or conceivably, direct us not to proceed at all. So that wouldn't be my expectation, but so that's the process. So what we're talking about here is in yellow are the county lands that currently there's up to $4 million to be spent on. You'll see that predominantly it's in around the A and C hills. There's also some property to the north of town. In purple, you'll see that's actually the A hill itself. In purple, that's privately held currently. There is discussion with funds from this amendment that would could be up to $200,000 that NRDP would provide to the county to purchase the A hill. So that's one of the alternatives which we explore. And then that pinker color, those are lands that currently belong to British Petroleum Atlantic Richfield. Should they be conveyed to the county at some point in the future, these restoration funds could be used on those lands as well. Yeah, so just acreage here, it's approximately 4,000 acres of lands. The A Hills 160 acres, and the British Petroleum lands 20 acres.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
These funds could be used on those BP lands that we think for their potential. They could be.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that first. I'm actually really comfortable with people asking clarifying questions as we go. So just shout out, like if you have one, like Chris just did. So as I understand it, Chris, if in the future those BP lands come to the county, then we could spend restoration funds. Not before. Only these funds are directed to lands that are in county ownership at the time. So, but yeah, please do ask me questions as we go along. I think sometimes it's. All right, so the good thing in developing this document was that, we have extensive work that we've already done on Mount Hagen and Sucky Ridge in terms of essentially, what Brendan should say was keeping the dirty dirt on the hill, or the dirtiest dirt on the hill, which means keeping heavy metals from getting. So on Mount Hagen and on Stuckey Ridge, we did complete our remedial work. And what we look to is which of those techniques which we developed on Mount Hagen and Stuckey Ridge in terms of steep slope reclamation, best management practices, erosion control. See which of those practices are most applicable to county lands. And then we also consulted with the county itself to see what their goals were for recreational management. And we're in discussion with Dishwalking Park about what they saw as the highest priority and best opportunities to restore a wildlife habitat on the uplands. So based on all that information, we essentially laid out what I'll call restoration categories, but it's 3 different funding pots. So out of $4 million, basically, we're going to have so much money in one category, so much in another. So the 3 categories are ecological restoration, wildlife habitat restoration, and recreational services restoration. And all those categories are derived both on the input we get from our publics and from agencies, as well as on what our initial claims were damages in the first place. Within each one of those categories, we have specific objectives. In the ecological category, what we identified as our objectives were to enhance aspen stands, to revegetate and manage weeds along trails, and to reduce erosion using funds from the ecological category. For wildlife habitat, we will look to enhance native grasslands and shrub grasslands and restore riparian habitats. For recreational services, what we provide funds for is to design and develop multi-user trails, to consolidate and connect trails, and to provide signage and access to those trails. So again, we've got $4 million. We're splitting it up to 3 different pots, and then within each one of those pots, we have essentially targeted actions. That makes sense? Okay. So when it all boils down, this is on some of the handouts, and but what it comes down to is we have this funding alternatives table. So on the top row, you see the categories to expend funds. So it's ecological, wildlife habitat, recreation, and then on the farthest right it would be the A-Hill purchase, whether or not funds will be allocated to that, and then the total amount under each alternative that would be spent. So under alternative 2, which is the ecological and wildlife focused alternative, we would more to those resources than we would to restoration and recreation. So for example, where wildlife is prioritized and ecological, we got $2.6 million that would be available. Under alternative 3, where recreation is prioritized, there would be $2.75 million proposed for recreation. So again, each one of those alternatives is named basically on what its focus is. So alternative 2, the focus and the funds are mostly for ecological and wildlife. Alternative 3 is focused on recreation. And then under alternative 4, there'd be $1.9 million for recreation and wildlife. Were combined in 1.9 for, I misspoke a second. Under the balanced alternative 4, there'd be $1.9 million for recreational services restoration, and then 1.9 combined for wildlife habitat and ecology. So those are our 4 alternatives. And again, how many funds are allocated to each category just basically depend on what for the highest priority.
And right, what time?
Yeah.
Hey, person.
So the Carl feels free to weigh in an hour later. But the county has an agreement with the landowner of record, to purchase it, and under, alternatives 2, 3, and 4, NRDP would provide up to $200,000, to buy those lands. So, but NRD again would be the funding agency. We're not the ones who'd actually hold the property. Paul, do you have anything to toss in on that?
Not really, but, this is Carl Herring, if anyone, I mean, it's still to require it into the county ownership. Not only for the things that they were doing, this is, not sure.
Good. So what we'll be looking for, amongst other things, for comment from you all in this room would be, which one of these alternatives you think makes the most sense? Is it to, where do we want to focus on? Or is there something we missed? Or another type of activity which we haven't identified? Those are the kind of comments that are most helpful. So yeah, just checking again, like the program, the governor, we want to know what our publics think. I mean, these are public funds that are gained from injuries to our research. So it's, it's why we're giving. So. All right, so I'm just going to walk through by alternative, essentially. Yeah.
Before we get started, do you have any idea what the cost per mile is on trip construction with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Not off the top of my head right now. It's kind of hard too because things are really. And when I walk through the alternatives, actually, I'm relatively. It's not priced out, because it really depends on what the design costs are and what kind of trail you're building. There's a ton of variables. And actually, but for the ecological and the wildlife, I was able to break how much the plants cost, how much is a crew cost, plant, et cetera, et cetera. So we did the best we could in the amendment to show how we derive costs for wildlife and ecological habitat restoration. But for the trail, it's kind of like, that we're not going to have enough funds to meet the needs and the interests of the community. So I'll leave it there before I go any further in the weeds. So under the first alternative, yeah.
So we're having trouble with this hearing online, so we're gonna have Ray repeat your question back, and if you could state your name as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Or I'll do that. So
Thank you.
going forward. All right, so under the first alternative, that's our no action alternative. We're always required to analyze for no action alternative. And I guess, well, in that case, we wouldn't spend anything on ecological restoration, habitat restoration, or services restoration. The cost would be up to $100,000. We've already some early restoration work we've already done, plant revegetation, as well as for staff time to develop the amendment and look at your public comment. But there'd be some costs, but again, we really would not be meeting the program's goals. Our goal is to spend these funds and do it in a way that's consistent with the public's interest. But that's alternative one. Yeah. Yeah, Terry, or Gary.
Yeah. Where would the remaining money go?
Sure. So that's Gary Oldhouse. He's asking where the funds would go if we did, essentially, if we took the no action alternative And that is a helpful question. There's a pot of funding of which this is just a subset, which is directed towards restoration on Mount Hagen and Sucky Ridge. So if we didn't spend $4 million in county lands, those funds would remain in that overall pot of funding, which we continue to use to pursue restoration on Sucky Ridge and Mount Hagen. So, yes, these Anaconda monies potentially are a portion of the remainder. We completed remedy and stuff. Yeah. Thank you, Gary. That's good. Good.
This is great.
Yeah.
On restoration, and on agriculture.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did complete remedy, but we're continuing to pursue restoration and cooperation with fish, wildlife, and parks on Hagen, and we're essentially maintaining remedy. So, okay, so I'm just going to outline here in the top row, you see the restoration category at the top, and then underneath it, it's just a brief description of what work would be pursued. So under alternative 2, where ecological and wildlife would be prioritized, we looked at thin conifers from all identified aspen stands. The goal being to enhance the vigor of those aspen stands by removing encroaching. We'd also revegetate along existing trails and any decommissioned trails. We'd be able to do that 5 times in the course of 10 years. And we complete erosion control on 50 acres. For wildlife habitat, for the ecological and wildlife alternative, we'd enhance 50 acres of grasslands, enhance 50 acres of shrub grasslands, and restore 2 miles of wildlife habitat. That would be our goal. So for revegetation, there'd be only really modest funds available, $300,000. So it would provide matching funds to kind of provide seed monies for some rec projects, but certainly with $300,000, you're not going to be able to complete, full trail system, right? So, but again, and there would be funds under the alternative 2 allocated to purchase a hill. But the majority of funds, again, go to ecological habitat restoration, ecological restoration, and wildlife habitat restoration. Okay, so under alternative 3, this is where recreation is prioritized. $2.75 million would be allocated to be used potentially on recreation projects. That would provide enough funds to complete 1 high-cost project, like a trail network between the A and C hills, or multiple lesser cost projects, and to provide signage throughout the trail network. So that would be a good chunk of funding for recreation, but we don't anticipate, based on all universal projects which were laid out in the county's open max plan, $2.7 million would need to be enough to accomplish all the rec projects which people have identified in Anaconda. So, under this recreation alternative, there would be $1 million for ecological habitat restoration that would provide enough funding to thin conifers in places where there's medium and low density encroachment in aspen stands. Also, there'd be funding to revegetate along trails 2 times in the course of a decade. And then for wildlife habitat, we'd be able to restore 2 miles of right. Okay, so the 4th alternative is the balanced alternative. This alternative, as I mentioned, there'd be $1.9 million for wildlife habitat and ecological restoration combined, and $1.9 million for recreational services restoration, and like our other action alternatives, it'd be $200,000 to purchase the A hill. For ecological, that would provide enough funding to treat all of our aspen stands revegetate along trails 2 times in the course of a decade, and to complete erosion control on 50 acres. For wildlife habitat, we'll be able to enhance up to 500 acres of grasslands and 50 acres of shrub grasslands and restore 2 miles of riparian habitat. And for recreation, we'd anticipate that for $1.9 million, we build to either provide seed monies for, multiple lesser priority projects, or provide a significant amount of funding for one higher priority project. So when we did our analysis of these various alternatives, what we found was that the last alternative, the balanced alternative, really makes most sense. It's the current preferred alternative. And that's because that alternative would provide funding to meet all of our objectives underneath all of the restoration categories. It would also best meet the legal and policy criteria, which guide the NRDP and restoration funds expenditures. There'd be enough funding that we could simultaneously proceed with projects in all the restoration categories. So that would provide opportunities to integrate work across the board. And that allocation of funding would provide the maximum opportunity to secure matching funds and also so that's what we found. But we are, again, interested in all of your input on which alternative makes the most sense, and if there are any other actions in terms of restoration that would make sense. So this is just basically how to we would ask you to email comments and our NRDP at mt.gov. Put 2024 Anaconda Uplands Amendment in the subject line. You can mail us comments to us in Helena. That address is on our website as well. Again, the deadline for comments is 11:59 p.m. on January the 15th. We do have a QR code here, which links you to a page which has the document in its entirety, the amendment, as well as, just additional information on how to submit comments. I welcome folks to call me, email me anytime, certainly available for questions now and just briefly after people want to visit. And then I know Doug Martin, administrator, is always very welcoming, conversations with community members. So that's what I have. So really appreciate everybody coming, just like earnestly. I know it's a cold winter night. It takes some motivation to get out of the door and away from the fire, the dinner, whatever else. So really do appreciate the time and the way it takes to come to meetings like this. So,
are you ready?
Yeah.
Duncan Adams.
Thank you, Duncan.
Is the $4 million in a fund that's accruing interest?
The $4 million is, so there was a fund that was set up associated with that $13.3 million. And I should say, this is Duncan Adams from the Montana Standard, wondering if the funds are accruing interest. So yes, so that $13.3 million that was initially, we've spent some of those funds down to complete restoration and remedy on Mount Hagen and Stucky Ridge. That fund is accruing interest currently. So yes, into that.
Are there any restrictions on the type of preparation?
So Kirsty Yeager with Fish, Wildlife and Parks asking if there are any restrictions on what type of recreation you want. The answer is basically, as envisioned, funds could be used for multi-user trails is really the goal. When we won this settlement, I should say, agreed to a consent decree with Atlantic Richfield Company. they're really for damages that were lost. Was originally envisioned was hiking, hunting, bird watching. Those were the kind of resources that, that I think were originally considered as us replacing. Now, we live in a world where there's mountain biking, four-wheelers, and other opportunities. We think it would be most consistent with the original plan on, trails that are, meet the needs of multiple users. Other questions? Yeah.
But Steve, Anaconda. You're able, I know there's quite a few, describe the elements that you use to evaluate each alternative.
Sure, yeah. I have a slide for that, fortunately, for my memory. Not sure if you guys can see this, but so, yeah, we basically, as our one set of evaluation criteria we have are the legal criteria. And this is kind of what if we have a project that comes forward to us, we go through this checklist, I guess would be one way of thinking of it. It's legal criteria and the policy criteria that guide, that really inform and guide, how we evaluate the alternatives. But those, I don't know, Steve, I'll read them, and if you have a specific question, I can delve into it, but they're technical feasibility, so that's, is it something that's been done before? Is it something that's feasible? Relationship of expected costs, benefits, cost effectiveness, results of response actions, so that how it would interface with, remedy occurred essentially. There's environmental impact, recovery period, and potential natural recovery. That's how any given action would influence time to return to base re-injury. Human health and safety, and then the applicability with state, federal, and tribal laws, policies. And then also whether or not project should already be funded by a government. That's called more. But typically, NRDP is, restoration funds should not be used to replace something that governments would already be doing, but yeah. And then price is the other. So that's kind of my check. And now Steve Hill, just for the record here, Steve Hill was asking, what the criteria were for which we evaluated restoration actions. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, I just think it's important.
Yeah. No, it's we all could be king, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. Go ahead.
Upgrade change with CN. Either getting back to the 13.3 million money there. Is there any conceivable options down the line where the amount could be altered for more funds might be and but is needed for county projects, or is that real sense? How much is going?
Yeah, so repeating the question, James Crossan with the Anaconda leader. The question is, as I understand it, would there be availability potentially for more than $4 million to be spent?
What's already been set aside?
Yeah. At this juncture, no, is the answer, and I guess, yeah. So the original document really was focused on state lands, remedy and restoration, and this was a contingency should we have extra funds. But I guess we're happy that we're able to provide, these funds, but I don't think with our we have continuing obligations to maintain work on Stucky Ridge and the Mount Hagen Wildlife Management Area and to continue restoration there. So I don't anticipate that there'd be additional funds available to Anaconda at this point.
Johnny Cochran, a stand of aspen is a single tree. And as a scientist, how are you going to deal with that? Are you going to figure out certain areas that you're going to concentrate? Because what you're talking about, I've been through this before, it's difficult, but it's worthwhile.
Okay.
The end result is amazing.
So we have a consultant who's worked with us extensively on Mount Hagen. And they helped us delineate polygons, I guess, of aspen that have similar characteristics in terms of their age and their condition. And based on that mapping effort, we have identified areas where we'd work. Should want to go down the road as far as
Okay.
what delineates. I mean, some aspen are individuals and some should be much wider. But so, yeah, we're just using reasonable judgment and that will be further.
But you
When we get to,
professional
sorry,
on that. Yes.
when we get down to the line, more time and delineating work. And we have some parties in the public who are really interested in working on aspen and. More questions? Happy to have them. Yeah, go ahead, Chuck. Chuck, you start.
I'm all I look at, and I do about people, and I still never even and all of
Potentially, go ahead and ask me a question. I do have more to add. So,
them. We have looked at, people and what are the law? People seasonally, and
actually, I don't know that. And I should, Chuck. So the question was from Chuck Stuckey to Anaconda. Do we have flow data on sheep gulch and where is that? So, I don't find it. Is the honest answer in both of those. And we had initially envisioned, using beaver dam analogs kind of along the length of sheep gulch to try to expand that riparian corridor. But it's really a pretty narrow gulch and the road is right beside it. So on further discussion with Fish, Wildlife and Parks, I think if we were to employ beaver dam analogs and sheep gulch, it'd be more like waters than lowers. There's just not a lot of room to work. Yeah. So, that help? Somewhat? Anybody else?
Agree, I do, Imperial House again, and Thomas Gordon's letter. They, a ways back, I seen, future trails on Stucky Ridge. Are those, still in the plan stage, or are those already, are they already paid for? After the plan stage?
Do you mean on the DNRC, Stucky Ridge, obviously, the our nine areas along geographic feature. Where on Stucky Ridge are you referring to?
Well, they, like, it starts with the trail behind it, to your park.
Yeah.
Up and there's, kind of like a big circle up there, and it comes back down.
So are you the Old Works Trail is that what you're referring to? That's just out of a walking trail there?
Yes, and that's right now, that's right now.
Yeah, that's, yeah,
Because, I think, kind of, good and for coming on that area, to go up onto the bridge.
right. So Gary Oldhouse, Anaconda, asking about, trail systems at Ducky Ridge. So yeah, so in the Anaconda open lands plan, there are trails identified which would come off that Old Works Trail. And they could potentially be, funded under this restoration plan. But again, that open lands plan has a lot of trails potentially identified. So there's going to have to be some work done by the county and its constituents in deciding where to focus funds. So. Yeah,
Bob Andreas.
yeah,
Obviously, when you do remediation, whether it's trees, grass, shrubs, you're gonna be dealing with the soil. Is there any technical stuff that's done to analyze the soils for pH, heavy metal concentrations before disturbing the soil?
yeah, it's a good question, Bob. Some of that's more pertinent to, I guess, the remedial work that's been done and is being completed still by Atlantic Richfield Company. As far as restoration plantings, we would be looking to identify the best sites, which are going to be places with appropriate, aspect and actually, that are not covered in weeds and where there's, appropriate growing conditions. As to whether we're going to be sampling every place we put a plant in the ground to see what the soil condition is. I mean, no, I think, we will be employing contractors, who have good knowledge of appropriate places to plant. So, and identify those areas. So does that help? I know you're a forester.
It was just something that we did on our project.
Yeah.
We had MSU analyze a really good sized sample of the soils to let us know those, the guidelines.
Okay.
It's kind of important.
Oh, yes, I'm aware of that. We would plant plants in places that are most appropriate. So.
Good luck.
So, yes, there are some challenging growing conditions in Anaconda and some of these lands. Okay, anybody else? Yeah, Jody has more requests.
If you'd like to unmute there.
Yeah, this is Gunnar Evelson. I would just want to comment earlier. But someone asked, well, the work is done. Actually, EPA, the Superfund part of it, is still monitoring the surface water quality below the streams. So while all the construction work has been done by Superfund, there's still surface water quality going on. And NRD is doing a great job of restoration. But I will shut up for now.
Okay, so Brian, do you want to? So that was Gunnar with CDM Smith, who Gunnar works for the EPA and was commenting just on the fact that the remedy is ongoing. And so I didn't quite catch. I guess that was more comment than a question, Gunnar. Is that right?
Yeah, more of a comment.
Yeah. Right.
Actually,
Brian
more of a
Bovar.
response to a comment.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Right. I think that was kind of just about the maintenance. So we have that with the rest of the units. maybe. That it's still kind of long-term maintenance. I think you mentioned that earlier. That's sort of apart from the forming plan for this. Kind of the no action option also. What will the funds be used for? It's a combination of kind of long-term maintenance, and the great restoration work that they're doing in the state parcels.
Yeah, so sorry, I don't know how to best communicate this, but Bob Gunner and Brian Lobar with the EPA are, what they're trying to speak to is the fact that, there's ongoing monitoring by EPA and work by Atlantic Richfield Company. That is all, monitoring this acidity and site conditions and so forth. Is that correct?
And then there's it's was the other thing I mentioned, the water, surface water. There's the California Creek water objectives that we're also trying to meet long term and still yet to reach those objectives.
Right. So NRD on these Anaconda County lands, this is a good area of clarification, actually. So the remedy is being accomplished by Atlantic Richfield Company and is still ongoing. So the restoration funding is what we're focused on, not the cleanup, so to speak, which is the remedy, but restoration natural resources. That's what we're doing here. Whereas paving and stuff, we also did remedy. But on county lands, Atlantic Richfield Company is responsible for remedy. Anything else? Yeah.
This is just for me to clarify the process. So RD is providing funding to county within the county, take the lead on how they take the trail and develop the trail. RD is really the funding for that what first about the money spent and how it's spent for wildlife. And so I would then work with the county on their proposal. The wildlife.
Yeah, I think we're good. So clarifying question. Chris Yeager with FWP, and basically the question is how implementation will proceed. And that's an excellent question. It's currently proposed the county would be responsible for advancing through annual work plans what they'd like to accomplish with NRDP funds and with our staff, work to go through those criteria, make sure the county's proposals were consistent with this restoration plan, the amendment, and then we'd say, go forward and do these projects. This project doesn't qualify, but how about, if you could change it? So that's the case for restoration. In the case of wildlife habitat and ecological, that would be led by NRDP. So yourself and other staff in Region 2 would work directly with me in terms of identifying projects, further defining them, and then, NRDP would then ultimately, go out and work with contractors who say plans, bigger brush changes in a real area. So FWP would be working directly with NRDP. And what? And that just for sharing, that's a fairly typical model, how FWP and NRDP work. Anybody else? Yeah.
So for several of the alternatives, proposing additional recreation on injured lands, would there be monitoring of things that could be harmful to recreation users?
So yes, the question is whether there be monitoring in terms of if there was recreation which stirred up harmful materials. I answer that in part, and then I'll also boot it to Brian Lobar with EPA in part. We're done. The quick answer is that in the high arsenic areas, directly below the smelter and also some near the old smelters near Stuckey Ridge, those areas where there'd be any danger in human recreation, there's human recreation is excluded from those sites. So we wouldn't. Yeah, that's how we're limiting that risk by keeping the folks out of the high arsenic areas, and they are actually brought that map too. This doesn't really show the data of this, but this is an ultra high arsenic area. Let's see. There's a main slag pile, but so public recreation wouldn't be allowed within the high arsenic areas. That's how we're sort of avoiding that risk. As far as any other monitoring of for recreation, I guess I wouldn't anticipate it. We're just trying to avoid risk by keeping people out of where they shouldn't be. Brian, do you have anything to add? Brian Lobar, EPA.
No, so I think that, in the kind of longer version of something that the 100-page kind of PDF, it's also kind of attached to the meeting invite, right? That there's the kind of the explanation about avoiding, especially anything that's motorized in areas that are higher arsenic levels. I mean, passing through isn't a concern in the risk assessment for areas kind of 1,500 milligram range, but it's not an area where you want to get out and play in the dirt. So can't say it. I think for the long-term monitoring, hopefully everyone kind of knows, at least for lead, the residents within in Anaconda have brief lead testing. It's a community hospitals. That's paid for by Ridgefield under the settlement with the state and on the U.S. government. That there isn't long-term state arsenic monitoring. There was kind of a study done with the ETSDR a few years back. That's on the EPA website. Results there, and of course the protectiveness of the remedy is evaluated every 5 years. 5 years, 5-year review. And kind of this question we just did, but there are plans for setting up air quality monitoring along
basically be keeping people out in places where there's danger associated with soil disturbance. And one way to ensure that will happen is when we have projects where there be significant ground disturbance or anything else. Actually, EPA and British Petroleum will actually have the opportunity to review those.
Working closely and sharing information about the balance of some of those areas, so that when the trail design be safe as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. What else? Anybody else have questions about priorities? Yeah.
Steve Gonzalez, Anaconda. What's the time period after January 15th? What's the time period for you guys to analyze and make determinations?
Yeah, thank you. Steve Gonzalez, Anaconda, wondering what are time frames. I'm just pausing because I'm the person in this room who's most excited as all of anybody to get things moving. So, it would depend in part on, just how much public comment we have. You know, we're gonna try to turn it right. My guess is we'd advance, a final document to the trustee in February, but again, I have to give a little bit of caveat. It depends on, depends on how many changes we might make. And then since it is during the legislative session, I guess I can't make any promises on the trustee schedule. Our goal, and I think it's pretty achievable, is to put funds on the ground, this spring and summer using these funds. But yeah, certainly 2025, and I think before this, it's a quick.
Chris, Marchand, has there been any thought, if all of this remediation we're doing, well, the remediation all done by BPO, okay,
Sure.
and then the restoration, we have funds. That come from there. This work. But as I look at this landscape, there are some, it seems to me there's some opportunities that have bring in other nonprofit, philanthropic groups to help do that. And one of the things that I think about, and I think there's got to be more opportunities, but we recognize that we have this great Aspen flow, and there's a lot of people that are interested in that. And we looked at all to find other groups that might come in and bring some resources that would help us do what we're doing, to make our money go farther and maybe to take those projects to places quicker and better than what we can do. David?
I'm moving this ball down the road. Chris Marchand, is for matching funds. So I know the county and some other parties in the room right now, they're trying to identify matching funds to work on rec projects. As far as the wildlife habitat piece and ecological restoration, not yet, but we always are looking for opportunities to leverage funding. That's one of our dominant criteria for evaluating projects. And, yeah, definitely welcome that. Future.
So, Jim, you're on us first. Kind of getting at what you're saying here. If you went heavy on the ecological wildlife, and then somehow recreation side find grant money or something, this could be the start of building it better. Is it time to be, or is it?
Not quite understand your question, sorry.
Well, if money can be raised to help fund trails,
Sure.
does that have to be, you're talking springtime to start the other, right?
In 2025, I think we'll have an improved document which will enable us to spend. And it could be amongst any of those, whether it be trails projects, whether it be ecological wildlife habitat. So I think, yeah, and as far as matching funds, I guess the more partners, the better.
Trying to get a grasp on, because it takes time to raise.
Yeah, absolutely. So the good thing is we have some money, whatever the category is, we have these NRDP seed monies, and we can get more done, more partners. All right, well, I'm hearing a pause. So anything online, Jody? Anything online? Okay, Gunnar had that observation. And then, yeah, I guess I just really encourage folks to do make comments. Again, they're due by the 15th. And yeah, I really appreciate everybody being here and look forward to, especially down the line, working with everybody to implement some of these projects.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks, Ray. Good job.
Thanks, Ray.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah.